Right now, something is happening that most people don't fully understand yet. But in a few days, it could be the only thing everyone is talking about. Because while headlines are still catching up, reports are confirming a rapid U.S. military deployment toward one of the most dangerous and strategically critical regions on Earth, the Strait of Hormuz. And this is not a routine movement. This is not a training exercise. This is a high-speed, high-alert deployment involving airborne forces, the kind of units that are only sent in when timing is critical, when the situation is unstable, and when decisions need to be made fast. According to multiple reports, including the Associated Press, at least 1,000 U.S. troops from the 82nd Airborne Division are already being deployed into the Middle East, with additional forces expected to follow. In military terms, airborne units are rapid response forces. They are trained to move fast, secure key locations, and stabilize situations before they spiral out of control. So when you start hearing numbers like 3,000 troops being positioned near one of the world's most sensitive choke points, it tells you something very important. This is not just about presence. This is about preparation, and the timing of this deployment makes it even more significant, because it comes at a moment when tensions in the region are already at a breaking point. Over the past several weeks, the conflict involving the United States, Israel, and Iran has escalated in ways that are difficult to ignore. Airstrikes, missile launches, drone attacks, and failed diplomatic efforts have all contributed to a rapidly evolving situation that is no longer contained within a single region. According to Reuters reporting, negotiations have been attempted, including a U.S.-backed proposal for de-escalation. But Iran has rejected that proposal, calling it unreasonable, and has instead issued its own demands. At the same time, military operations have continued across multiple fronts, increasing the risk of further escalation. And this is where things become critical, because this is not just a regional conflict. This is a global pressure point. To understand why, you need to understand the importance of the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway, located between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, is one of the most important shipping routes in the world. Every single day, roughly 1/5 of the global oil supply passes through this corridor. That includes shipments from major producers like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates. In simple terms, this is one of the arteries that keeps the global economy running. If this artery is disrupted, even briefly, the effects are felt everywhere. And we're already seeing early signs of that. According to Bloomberg, energy markets have reacted quickly to the rising tensions. Oil prices have surged, approaching levels that reflect uncertainty and risk. In parts of Asia, countries are already experiencing fuel shortages, long lines at gas stations, and emergency planning for potential supply disruptions. In Bangladesh, for example, reports indicate that motorists are waiting for hours to refuel, with queues stretching significant distances. This is not happening because supply has already collapsed. It's happening because markets are reacting to the possibility that it could. That's how sensitive this region is, and that's why military movements near the Strait of Hormuz carry so much weight. Because even the perception of instability can trigger real-world consequences. Now, when airborne troops are deployed into this kind of environment, it's not random. These units are designed for specific missions. They are used to secure critical infrastructure, reinforce strategic locations, and act as a deterrent against further escalation. They can be deployed quickly, often within hours, and are capable of operating in complex and uncertain conditions. So the presence of these forces suggests that the situation is being treated as both urgent and unpredictable. But here's where the story becomes even more complex. Because while military movements are increasing, diplomatic efforts are still ongoing. According to Reuters, there have been attempts to negotiate a ceasefire or at least reduce tensions. A U.S.-backed initiative reportedly presented a framework for de-escalation, but it has not been accepted. Iran has instead issued its own counterproposal, and discussions remain uncertain. At the same time, according to Al Jazeera, attacks have continued across the region, including strikes on infrastructure and ongoing military operations. This creates a situation where diplomacy and escalation are happening simultaneously. And that's one of the most dangerous dynamics in international conflict, because it means there is no clear direction, no clear resolution, only uncertainty. Meanwhile, the human impact of this situation is becoming increasingly visible. Reports from Reuters and the Associated Press indicate that civilian casualties have occurred in multiple areas. Infrastructure has been damaged, and displacement continues to affect communities on the ground. Aid organizations are warning that resources are stretched and humanitarian efforts are facing significant challenges. This is an important reminder that behind every headline, there are real people dealing with real consequences. And as tensions rise, those consequences tend to increase. But beyond the immediate human impact, there's a broader issue that affects everyone, regardless of where they live. And that is the global economic impact. Because when a region like the Strait of Hormuz becomes unstable, it doesn't just affect the countries directly involved. It affects supply chains, energy markets, and global prices. According to Bloomberg, countries are already preparing for worst-case scenarios. This includes stockpiling fuel, exploring alternative energy sources, and adjusting economic policies to account for potential disruptions. In some regions, there are already signs of fuel hoarding and increased reliance on coal as a backup energy source. These are not long-term solutions. They are emergency responses to uncertainty. And uncertainty is exactly what we're dealing with right now, because no one can say with certainty how the situation will unfold. There are several possible paths forward. One possibility is stabilization. In this scenario, the increased military presence acts as a deterrent, preventing further escalation. Diplomatic efforts gain traction and tensions gradually decrease. This is often the goal of deployments like this, to show strength without triggering conflict. Another possibility is prolonged standoff. In this scenario, military forces remain in place, tensions stay high, and occasional incidents continue to occur. This creates a situation where the risk remains constant and economic pressure builds over time. And then there is the possibility of wider disruption. In this scenario, the situation escalates further, affecting shipping routes, energy supplies, and global markets in a more significant way. Right now, based on available information, the situation appears to be somewhere between a prolonged standoff and the risk of wider disruption. And that's why this moment matters, because decisions made in the coming days could influence which path the situation takes. It's also important to note that military deployments like this are not always about immediate action. Often, they're about positioning, about being ready, about ensuring that if something does happen, there are forces in place to respond quickly and effectively. This is part of a broader strategy that involves not just military considerations, but also political, economic, and diplomatic factors. And that's why it's important to look at the full picture, because focusing on just one aspect, whether it's troop numbers or individual events, doesn't capture the complexity of what's happening. This is a multi-layered situation. It involves multiple countries, multiple interests, and multiple possible outcomes, and that makes it difficult to predict. But it also makes it important to understand, because events like this don't stay contained. They ripple outward. They affect markets, policies, and everyday life. For example, if energy prices continue to rise, that can lead to higher transportation costs. Higher transportation costs can lead to more expensive goods, and more expensive goods can affect everything from groceries to manufacturing. This is how global events become local realities, and that's why even people far from the region should pay attention, because the impact is not limited by geography. It's shaped by systems, global systems, energy systems, economic systems, supply chain systems. And when those systems are under pressure, the effects are widespread. At the same time, it's important to approach this topic responsibly, because while the situation is serious, it is also evolving. Information changes, details are updated, and not everything is known in real time. That's why it's important to rely on verified sources, avoid speculation, and focus on what is confirmed. Based on current reporting, we know that U.S. airborne troops are being deployed to the Middle East. Tensions involving Iran, the United States, and Israel are ongoing. Diplomatic efforts have been attempted but have not yet resulted in a resolution. Energy markets are reacting to the situation, and the Strait of Hormuz remains a critical point of concern. What we don't know yet is how the situation will develop in the coming days, and that's where attention shifts from what is happening to what could happen. Because in situations like this, timing matters, positioning matters, and decisions matter. Right now, the deployment of airborne troops signals readiness. It signals awareness of risk. And it signals that the situation is being taken seriously at the highest levels. But it does not, on its own, determine the outcome. That outcome will depend on a combination of factors: military actions, diplomatic negotiations, economic pressures, and decisions made by leaders on all sides. So, as this situation continues to develop, the most important thing is to stay informed, to understand not just the headlines, but the context behind them. Because in a world where information moves fast, understanding is what allows you to keep up. And right now, understanding this situation means recognizing one key point. This is not just about troops. It's not just about one region. It's about a system under pressure. A system that connects energy, economics, and geopolitics in ways that affect everyone. And as that system responds to the current situation, the effects will continue to unfold, not all at once, but step by step, decision by decision, and moment by moment. Which means this story is not over. In many ways, it's just beginning. And as this situation continues to unfold, the next phase becomes even more important, because what happens after a rapid deployment like this often determines whether tensions cool down or intensify further. Right now, the presence of airborne troops near such a critical region is being interpreted by analysts as a signal of deterrence. In simple terms, it's meant to send a message that key routes, infrastructure, and regional stability are being closely monitored and protected. But history shows that when multiple sides are operating under pressure at the same time, even small incidents can have outsized consequences. According to ongoing coverage from global outlets like Reuters and the Associated Press, the region is already experiencing overlapping layers of tension. Military activity, diplomatic negotiations, and economic disruptions are all happening simultaneously. And when these layers overlap, it creates a highly sensitive environment where timing, communication, and decision-making become absolutely critical. One of the biggest concerns right now is miscalculation. Not intentional escalation, but accidental escalation. In environments where forces are positioned close to each other, where surveillance is constant, and where responses need to be quick, the margin for error becomes very small. A misunderstanding, a misinterpreted movement, or even a technical issue can trigger reactions that were never originally intended. This is why deployments like this are often accompanied by increased communication efforts behind the scenes. While public headlines focus on troop movements and conflict updates, there are usually parallel channels of communication working to prevent misunderstandings and reduce risk. At the same time, economic signals are becoming harder to ignore. Energy markets, in particular, are acting as an early indicator of how serious the situation is perceived to be. When uncertainty rises in a region responsible for a significant portion of global oil supply, markets react quickly, prices move, supply chains adjust, and governments begin contingency planning. According to Bloomberg, countries across Asia are already preparing for potential disruptions. This includes securing alternative energy supplies, managing reserves, and adjusting national strategies to account for prolonged instability. These are not measures taken lightly. They are responses to real concerns about supply reliability. And it's not just governments. Businesses are also reacting. Shipping companies are monitoring routes more closely. Insurance costs for transport through sensitive regions can increase. Logistics planning becomes more complex. All of this adds layers of cost and uncertainty to global trade. Over time, those costs can filter down into everyday life. Higher transportation costs can influence the price of goods, supply delays can affect availability, and uncertainty can influence financial markets in ways that impact investment, employment, and economic growth. This is why the Strait of Hormuz is often described as a global choke point. Because what happens there doesn't stay there. It spreads outward through systems that connect countries, industries, and communities. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation remains a critical part of the story. Reports from Reuters and AP indicate that ongoing military activity has affected civilian areas, infrastructure, and essential services. Displacement, resource shortages, and disruptions to daily life are becoming more common in affected regions. Humanitarian organizations are working to provide support, but they are also facing challenges. Funding constraints, access limitations, and security concerns all make it more difficult to operate effectively. This creates a situation where needs are increasing, but resources are under pressure. And as the situation evolves, those challenges can become more complex. At the same time, political dynamics are shifting. According to multiple reports, regional alliances and international positions are being tested. Countries are balancing their strategic interests, economic dependencies, and diplomatic relationships in real time. Some are calling for de-escalation. Others are strengthening their positions. And many are watching closely, waiting to see how the situation develops before making major decisions. This creates a global environment of cautious observation. Because in situations like this, timing matters not just on the ground, but also in policy decisions. A single development can change the direction of multiple responses, and that's why the coming days are so important. Because they will likely reveal whether current efforts lead toward stabilization, or whether pressures continue to build. Another factor to consider is the role of information. In fast-moving situations, information flows quickly, but not always evenly. Some updates are confirmed, others are still developing, and some are based on initial reports that may evolve over time. This is why responsible coverage focuses on verified information, avoids speculation, and updates as new details become available. Based on current verified reporting, we can say that U.S. airborne forces are being deployed to reinforce presence in the Middle East. The Strait of Hormuz remains a critical strategic focus. Tensions involving Iran, the United States, and regional actors are ongoing. Diplomatic efforts have been attempted, but have not yet resulted in a resolution. And global markets, particularly energy markets, are already reacting. These are the confirmed elements of the situation. Everything beyond that depends on how events unfold. And that brings us back to the central question, what happens next? One possible outcome is that the increased military presence stabilizes the situation. By reinforcing key areas and signaling readiness, it may reduce the likelihood of further escalation. This is often the intended effect of strategic deployments. Another possibility is that tensions remain high, with ongoing incidents and continued uncertainty. In this scenario, the situation does not resolve quickly, but also does not escalate dramatically. Instead, it becomes a prolonged period of instability. And then there is the possibility that new developments change the trajectory entirely. This could involve shifts in diplomacy, changes in military posture, or unexpected events that influence decision-making. Right now, all of these possibilities remain open. which is why monitoring the situation closely is so important. Because in moments like this, change can happen quickly. A single announcement, a single development, a single decision, and the entire dynamic can shift. For viewers trying to make sense of it all, the key is to focus on context, not just what is happening, but why it matters. Understanding the importance of the Strait of Hormuz, recognizing the role of airborne forces, seeing how energy markets are reacting, and understanding how global systems are connected. This context turns headlines into understanding, and understanding is what allows you to follow the story as it evolves, because this is not a static situation, it's dynamic, it's developing, and it's being shaped in real time. As we move forward, updates will continue to emerge.